Alright, hopefully we don't drop frames. Let's do this. Okay, so we are live for yet another episode of Summon Strategy in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, hello once again. I am Melixia from MCAST TV,
Hey, I'm Jackson, also from MKS TV.
and we're going to be explaining the new structure for Summoner Strategy right quick, and that is basically that we have decided from 5 champions to go down to 2 champions. I think we sort of both agreed that this would be a lot more comprehensive while we don't lose the quality of the show and the discussion between us both. And each host will choose 1 champion, and then we'll follow that up by a meta discussion. I think this will work a lot better, don't you?
Yeah, that'll be good.
We just decided that it's just going to be kind of a stronger way to do the broadcast. So I'm going to move right in since I want to keep these short for YouTube. And my choice for this week has been a champion that's very close to my heart, and that is Swain. And I just think Swain right now, in terms of the strength and power he has versus the current meta composition, is very, very good. His power in mid lane against AD bruisers and against the typical squishy APs is like not to be underestimated. It's just really, really powerful, especially when you're fighting these kind of Kha'Zix, Lee Sin, Jace type compositions that can be very hard to deal with for conventional APs. I think he is sort of unloved in the respect that he hasn't been paid attention to when he's probably one of the strongest AP carries in the game right now. Although he hasn't been changed significantly, I still think he's just unbelievably powerful. He's just one of those champions that, for whatever reason, gets ignored by the meta. And I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, like I said, he's really tough to deal with in lane. He has really high kill potential on his opponent, and it's not easy to kill him back. You can't really get on top of him because of his CC, and especially if someone's like, if a jungler comes to gank or something like that, he can just slow him down or root him or both and just walk away unscathed.
Yeah, I think that the tank and caster hybrid is something that's like really rarely explored on League of Legends heroes, and it's something that he's got going for him that makes him extremely strong. Because usually, if you're going to have a very strong AP champion, you're going to underestimate. You're gonna say, okay, that person's got a lot of damage, but I can take him out. But people underestimate how much hit points and how much tank capability that Swain has. Literally, like with his R up, he can walk into like 3 heroes, and if he's built correctly, which we're gonna show you, he can basically tank for his team. He can count as a frontliner, which is just insane when he has the AP damage. And that kind of ties into the other thing, which is that his dot damage is really hard to predict. A lot of people will go into a fight once he Qs and Es, and they'll stay in the fight because they haven't taken their damage immediately. And they don't realize that that QE combination with an Ignite is basically going to kill him. And so they keep fighting, and by the time they realize that the damage has been done, they're going to die. I mean, they're just done. So that's one of the reasons why he's so strong.
Yeah, he's really underestimated as a champion, I think. Like you said, he's just really tanky, puts out a lot of damage. He's a really high threat in a team fight, but at the same time, it's hard to kill him. So it's kind of like this, you know, weird situation where, so there's a target that you need to kill, but you can't kill him. So it's like, what do you do?
Yeah. And the other thing I guess is the W lock, and that's the one that I guess I always take W second on Swain because it lowers the cooldown to such an absurdly low amount. He basically has a 1.2 or 1 second lockdown on basically what's like a 5 or 6 second cooldown, and that lockdown is at such a range that if you can land those pretty reliably, you can change the course of team fights because you can catch ADCs, you can catch people out of position. Especially at lower elos, he really seems to punish that positioning. The people at low elos have the problem with positioning, and Swain seems to really dominate that mid game. When even if I lose my lane, there's been so many games where I've lost my lane to Swain, and then I've said, okay, I'm going to come back in the mid game, I'm going to make those team plays, and it's like okay, what do you do? Because I'm locking down everybody with those W's and killing people and turning fights into 4v5s.
Yeah, I mean, if you root one person, the other four people on your team just jump on him, and you turn the team fight into a 5v4 immediately. I mean,
Yep.
it's just such a powerful mechanic, and especially because it can lock down multiple people, which indirectly keeps, your AD carry safe and things like that. It's just a very powerful kit that he has to work
Yeah.
with.
Yeah. Very powerful. It feels. I guess I feel like I'm in control of the game with those W's, and that's a very rare feeling. Like oftentimes in low elo, because you feel like you feel like you're so out of control a lot of the time about making plays and things, especially from weird lanes and things like that. But Swain is just one of those champions that can do that. Um, I'll move into how I feel about the item builds for him. Make sure I get this right. So these are the items that I take on Swain. This is a standard build for him, and I'll discuss some of the starts and some of the ways we can alternate with this build. So I start Fairy Charm with a ward, 5 potions, and 1 mana potion. That gives him enough sustain in lane to deal with pretty much anything, especially those AD Bruiser compositions. It gives him a little bit of extra mana to handle with some Qs and Es if you don't hit all your passives, which makes a difference at low levels, but not so much later on, I've found. And then you take that ward. The ward is absolutely essential. You have to have the ward because you want to make sure that you prevent jungle ganks in your mid lane. I ward both sides of my lane pretty much at all times once after my first back with Swain. And the reason for that is because Swain is a really big lane bully. He's a person who can get right up in people's faces and just do a huge amount of damage. And if the jungle comes in, the jungle is going to try to shut that down because you're risking your positioning to get those plays. And I think that warding is critical against junglers because they will punish mid for doing that. And you want to push your opponent out of lane, but at the same time, you want to guard yourself against possible jungle ganks.
Yeah, I mean, double warding. I mean, Swain's strengths come from his 1v1, and you know, knowing that you're not gonna, nothing's gonna interfere with you messing with their mid laner is great because you can just bully him constantly and kill him. And
Yeah.
as long as you know that no one's coming, you have free reign to harass him as much as you want to.
Yeah. And I think it's a toss up on the Chalice situation. The Chalice is the next item, usually my item right after that. Chalice is the item I'll build if I'm against an AP mid because it's going to give me that extra magic resist, which I don't take with masteries, and I'll explain that later. Um, and at the same time, it will enable me to stay in lane for a very long time after when I'm using my ultimate after level 6. So the Chalice is a controversial decision. You cannot build it and go straight for Catalyst and then opt for other items like a Death Cap or things like that, and that's fine. I put the Chalice as part of my build because I'm often against AP mids or I'm in top lane, in which case I'm not going to have access to blue. And it's also a pretty generous assumption if you're gold or below to get blue anyway from your jungler. So I think that the Chalice is actually a pretty good decision as a first item. It also builds right from that Fairy Charm, so it can get you that extra mana regeneration fast that you need on Swain because for Swain, mana is basically an extra resource. You need it for everything.
Yeah, Swain is pretty much dead in the water when he's out of mana. His
Yeah.
ultimate saps a lot of it, and of course his abilities cost mana. So I like the Chalice a lot, just being able to keep it up as much as possible, and particularly against AP mids. You'll have as much mana as you need, and as well as some magic resist to stop some of their damage coming back at you.
And once you're kind of done with the Chalice, you sort of start to build into Swain's core, which is kind of trying to make a tanky AP and AP with damage. Rod of the Ages has been the go-to item since season 2 for this, and I'm still pretty happy with it. I start Catalyst after that item and after the Chalice because Catalyst makes him very tanky and makes him able to sustain in lane even better. So with Chalice and Catalyst, you're like sustaining crazy well, and you'll notice that you're very tanky as well. You say, well, but I don't have any damage. And this is, well, you actually, like, the damage that you get off the dots is sufficient enough to carry him through this phase. And once you start upgrading into that Rod of the Ages, which by the way, an extra kill or two will help a lot if you to get that Rod of the Ages quicker. Like your how well you're doing with Swain depends a lot on if you're getting that Rod of the Ages quickly. So the quicker you see it, like if you've got one at 14, 15 minutes, I mean, you're doing just unbelievably well. By 20 minutes is okay, things like that. And getting that Rod of the Ages up gives him that core tankiness that starts to define him as a character and makes him very, very powerful going into mid game. I've probably tested 200 Swain games or more. I mean, and finding that Rod of the Ages, I keep going back to that for that innate tankiness that really defines him in those team fights.
Yeah, I think Rod of Ages is pretty staple on him.
Hmm. I mean,
You
the
know,
other option would be Spirit Visage, right? But that's would be for like an AP very, very. I mean, I know you're a big fan of Spirit Visage, but that would be, I guess, in my opinion, like for a very AP centric team.
yeah, I think it's kind of situational.
Hmm.
I wouldn't necessarily always go Spear Visage on him. Like if they had an AP mid top and jungle, I might. Um, One other thing to know about the Catalyst is not only is it making you tanky, it's also giving you mana, and health when you level up. So
Hmm.
it's really, the longer you stay in lane, the more you're benefiting from it. Um, and if the other, if your opponent doesn't have any kind of sustain like that, you're just gonna push them out real easy.
Yeah, I like kind of like I said, like it sort of just defines that core tankiness of him, and moving moving out of the Rod of the Ages, you start to get into the spell penetration thing, which is um, you start Sorcerer's Shoes after that, and it's so after Sorcerer's Shoes, you'll notice like wow, I'm doing a lot of damage. Like I don't really have a lot of dedicated AP items necessarily, but I'm doing a lot of damage. Like I'm really doing a lot of damage, and moving into Leandries, you're still keeping with that tanky theme. You're still keeping with that theme of building Swain's HP and building his innate sort of like ability to take damage. But you're adding on this dot effect, which complements his E because it increases the damage on it, and his ignite, and it also gives him the capability to have extra spell penetration, which combined with Sorcerer's Shoes is massive. So Leandries really complements Swain well. I love it as an item on him. It makes his damage so much more noticeable, and he suddenly becomes such a threat in team fights. It's just crazy.
Yeah, I think Leandris is probably, if not the best, one of the best items on him.
Hmm.
Just applying that percent damage to, every one of your counters with his ultimate is just unbelievable.
Yeah, and so you're adding that Leandries, and then after that, you're kind of going into back to his tanky theme, which is the Zonias. And the Zonias is going to start giving you resistances. So you've already been building hit points with Raw of the Ages and Leandries. And Zonias is going to give you that resistances, and it's going to give you the ability to sort of position yourself in team fights as a tank. And by the time that you are out of your Zonias, you're pretty much healed up, right? I mean, like it's crazy how much utility that Zonias gives you in a team fight.
Yeah, like I was saying before, you're a high threat, a tanky high threat, which means you're gonna have to put a lot into you to take you out. Um, and so, when they do start focusing you, or you do eventually start losing some HP, and keep in mind they're using a lot of their damage on you if they are focusing you. Um, you just Zonias. You lose all the aggro that you have at the moment. Their team is used, a majority of their damage on you, and your team's free to fire back.
Yeah.
And it keeps you alive after all that focusing on you too.
Yeah, it literally wins team fights. I mean, you basically they can burn three or four ultimates on you. You're back in the fight, doing damage later. Like everyone that once you Zonias, like everyone just ignores you. Most unless you're alone. Like if you're in the rest of the team fight, they just change focus and they ignore you after that. It's crazy. And after Zonias, I like to finish Athenes. I think that's because it will guarantee you that mana for the late game, and at the same time will it just has a lot of general stats that are really useful. Um, and after I finish the Athenes, I always build Rylai's. Rylai's is really good if you can't catch people with your W, you can often double slow them with your Q and your E combination. And again, it adds that tank with an extra bit of hit points. And it's in general, I think this is a pretty solid Swain build. Some people would criticize it for being low on damage. If you feel that way, you can probably take out the Chalice and add a death cap, I would think. You're not you might have mana problems at that point, but at the same time, that's probably going to be covered by your masteries if you build it like I do. So I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
Um, yeah, I mean, if your team's really hurting for damage, maybe a death cap instead of the chalice. And at that point in the game, you're going to be getting every blue buff anyway, so you shouldn't have mana problems for team
Hopefully,
fights.
yeah.
Yeah. I do like the 20% cooldown reduction that chalice gives.
Hmm.
And I don't know. I really do like Athene's on him because it regenerates mana based on how much mana you're missing. And
Yeah,
so, the longer you're seeing a team fight, the more mana you're getting back. And it just really helps you. It really does help you keep your mana up in a team fight.
yeah. So this is sort of the core build I would take with Swain, um, and the reasons why I think it's really strong. I think moving into the masteries, um, pretty much there's pretty much a couple ways I'd build Swain with only a few caveats. The masters are really simple. The basics are just 2109. I take that extra mana regeneration because it's so critical in lane, especially early. Um, Jackson actually corrected me. I don't know if you want to talk about that on the non-utility tree.
Yeah. Mostly has some extra points in the mana per level,
Yeah,
and instead of having some points in I think that's Summoner's Insight. Um, Basically, I just had him swap 2 points out of the mana per level into the Summoner's Insight so that he could get the cooldown on summoner spells. Because you're trading 120 mana at level 18 for an extra 6% cooldown reduction on your summoner spells, which is actually a lot since summoner spells have a long cooldown, and that's going to go through the whole game. Whereas 120 mana at level 18 isn't that much.
yeah. I feel like that was probably a good decision. That the trade-off between those two masteries was pretty obvious when Jackson said it. Like he's like, no, actually consider this, and I'm like, oh, yeah, that is better. Okay, thanks. It's just that was a good correction. The 21 side of the mastery tree is really straightforward, except for I do take those basic attacks because I do want to get a little bit of extra damage on minions, because I really feel like that's pretty important in lane, since I'm not taking AD on Swain. The marks of magic penetration scale really, really well with his existing mana penetration you get from the masteries, and then the sorcerer's shoes and Leander's build. You'll find that you just have a huge amount of magic penetration, and you'll pretty much dust anybody without a lot of magic resist. This is so you don't have to build like void staff or have that as an extra item or anything like that. You pretty much get all the mana penetration you need based on your Leandries, your Sorcerer's Shoes, your Masteries, and your runes. Um, Armor Seals in lane, that's really straightforward. It's going to take less creep damage. That's actually what it's most important for. People would say, well, it's for harassing against AD bruisers, but that's not entirely true. The reason you want to take yellows is because you're going to be pushing him a lot ahead, and you're going to be taking extra creep damage. The reduction on the creep damage that you take from that is actually really important. Um, then, if you're really, really safe in your lane, I might take yellow mana regeneration seals, but it's iffy. It's iffy. And moving into the blues, I would say I always take mana regeneration because combined with Chalice, you don't have to worry about your mana regeneration problems, and your passive. And then your AP quints are just straightforward. I wouldn't build any other quints on him but that.
Yeah, two things you just said that I really liked.
Hmm.
The armor seals makes a lot of sense now that I think about it, because you are pushing the enemy champion, you are going aggressive, and you
You're
are
always
going
getting
to
hit by
take
creeps.
aggro.
Yeah.
So that makes a lot of sense. I like that a lot. Also, I like that you take 2 points in Butcher, which is the extra damage to minions and monsters, because you your passive is you get mana back per, creep kill, and although CSing is always important, to really keep his mana up, that's a really nice thing to keep in there. The trade-off is 2% cooldown reduction, but that's not even a big deal.
Not really, no. I mean, considering what it does for you, he's actually pretty hard to CS with, especially people that watch me CS. I'm like about the best CSer in the game, so that's probably an understatement. So I definitely try to get that going on Swain. Um, yeah, those are just the basic masteries and things like that. And this is pretty much how I'd build Swain. Once again, with that pretty standard tanky AP build, and these masteries and runes. Hopefully, this helps out for people that are kind of interested in trying this champion out. I know that a lot of people don't, and I'd encourage more people to try him because he's very very strong. He's awesome against most of the typical champions that are picked in this meta, and yeah, just give him a shot. I mean, any closing comments you think?
Um, yeah, I mean he's a strong champion. He's completely underplayed. I see him
Yeah.
never. He is just an incredible champion, and I don't know. I think he's a really pain in the butt when you go up against one. So,
Yeah, I mean, I think we'll move into some questions. You have some questions, save them for after the broadcast, and we'll move into your champion if you like.
okay. The champion that I picked was my favorite champion, Jarvan IV. Um, he's my favorite jungler right now, and I think he's a top jungler right now. I think he's, if not, I think he's probably top five, if not like top three. Um, he is just an incredibly strong champion. He's tanky with a lot of damage behind him. Um, he he's incredible for a jungler because he has such good ganks. He can gank from places that most junglers can't without being seen. Um, he has, a very strong gap closing ability. He can pop up an entire team with his E and his Q combination, um, which just it's just incredible on one champion.
Yeah,
Um,
it totally is. Like that gap closer has helped me so many times. Like I guess one other thing would be you want to always walk into lane first. You taught me that actually, right? As you walk into lane and then you use the EQ after you've hit them. Ideally, you don't want to come into lane with it. Isn't that right?
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
definitely. Definitely depends on the situation.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the times I coined this whole like fake gank term that I do all the time is, I'll come into mid and I'll walk up to their, mid laner and EQ and pop him up and he'll flash away. I'm like, okay. And then I know his flash is down. And then as soon as I have my ultimate, then I EQ into lane and ultimate him immediately so he's stuck in there and can't get out. And
Mm-hmm.
then that gives me and my mid laner free reign to attack him for 3.5 seconds and he dies.
Oh, that's pretty
Um,
cool. Yeah.
you don't need to like risk like walking the lane, him walking away. You just do a real quick surprise attack and he's stuck.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you know, it's a really strong mechanic, and the fact that his EQ is a gap closer as well as his ultimate is means you can just close the distance on somebody. I've had situations where I'm completely trapped by the enemy team, and I ultimate the furthest person from me, and then EQ out of my ultimate, and either they're stuck in my ultimate or behind it, and I'm out of there because they can't get around. You just got so many closing abilities.
You can also flash EQ ult, right? And you'll just
Yeah,
you'll jump like half the map.
yeah.
Yeah, like that's just crazy. Yeah.
There's so many times when I'm chasing somebody down or I'm going for a gank and I flash ult instead of EQ ult because I know their flash is up, and as soon as they flash, then I EQ them and they're
Okay.
popped up again. So instead of using the EQ CC to gap close, I use my flash to gap close and then use the EQ to pop them up after their flash has been used.
And using it in reverse as an escape mechanic is insane too, right?
Right. Going over walls. Um, I mean, there's a million ways you can do it. If I'm being chased and I'm low health, I'll lead someone into a weird spot and then EQ over a wall in the other direction, so it takes them longer to get come or to chase after me. He just has a million ways to get out.
Yeah.
Um, personally, I've never had a kill death ratio better than him because it's hard to kill him. It really is.
Hmm.
You just get out of so many sticky situations that most champions wouldn't be able to.
I've seen you get out of the most ridiculous stuff. Where like, you know how you have that mindset where you're like, okay, that guy's dead, and
Yeah.
you're like, I gotta leave that guy there, and then like 2 minutes later, I'll just see you running by with like 10 health, and I'm like, how the hell did he do that? Like, what's going on? It's
Yeah,
insane.
he's a lot of fun. He can do some really cool stuff. Couple of things he's really good at is he's a great initiator on an enemy team. For instance, like I've gotten really good at keeping track of whose flash is up or down. So, I'll flash or I'll EQ ultimate somebody to start a fight, and they're stuck in that fight or into my cataclysm for 3.5 seconds, and then my team just hammers on them, and then that's the fight, and then that person is pretty much instantly dead, and the fight goes
Hmm.
on from there. Um, and if I do like a flash ult and they like dive my team, then I can EQ and peel them out and slow them with my shield, which shields me and slows everybody else. So he's got a lot of peel mechanic and a lot of dive mechanics that are really really strong.
Yeah.
Honestly, I'm surprised he's not banned more often. Personally, when I don't feel like playing him, I ban him or I pick him. He's just too good to leave a chance that somebody else could pick him up.
Yeah. Do you feel like his nerfs at all have interacted with his ability to dominate jungle, or no?
Well, it was funny because well, first of all, I was jungling Jarvan in season 2 before it became popular. Like I'm that guy. I'm the hipster
I know. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
guy. And they nerfed him a little bit here and there, and they made it so his flag didn't grant armor to his surrounding team, which now that I think about it is probably more broken than it was more like they were fixing something that was broken
Hmm.
than nerfing the champion to be unplayable. Um, even if they took it still applies attack speed to his teammates, but even if they took that away, I don't care. Like the reason he's good is his gap closing and his
Hmm.
CC. It's not because his passive or the AOE or whatever helps his team. It's that he's so mobile,
Hmm.
and he's that way throughout the entire game. As soon as you hit level 2, you're all over the place.
Yeah.
So yeah, he's just really good. And his ultimate synergizes with a lot of different champions, like an Anivia or an Orianna or
Hmm.
anyone with hard CC. A Fiddlesticks is brutal.
Yeah.
Uh, it's so his Cataclysm can be used in such a good way.
Yeah. Those AOE comps.
hmm And he's also actually pretty good at dueling early on too.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, so that's my basic rundown of Jarvan's strengths and what you can do with him. So I want to move into item build. Um, so for Jarvan, I use jungle with him, so I start machete with 5 pots. As soon as I'm done clearing my 2 buffs, I immediately start ganking everywhere. Um, because with a slow, with my pop up, and with my slow from my shield, it's really hard to get away from him. Um, and so that's a pretty standard start, machete and 5. But I move into boots and Spirit Stone next. Spirit Stone is really good for the mana and health regen to stay healthy and to keep your mana up because he doesn't have a lot of base mana. His abilities don't cost that much, but he still needs to keep it up if he's planning on jungling in the same time you're out away from base. From there, I go straight into Spirit of the Lizard Elder, which I think I've wrestled with this a little bit, but I think Spirit of the Lizard Elder is the way to go. It adds 45 extra damage. It adds true damage over time, which helps with clearing. It adds a lot of damage to the enemy team, and it can be applied in an AoE. So let's say I pop up their entire team with my EQ. That means they've all been applied with the Q damage and the true damage from the Lizard Elder.
Now, I have a question. Is that Elder Wizard has been nerfed into oblivion and continues to be. So, like, is there going to be a point, or are we at that point now where where we will have to replace this build, and if so, what do we do it with?
Okay. Well, first of all, not like as it stands now, I think Lizard Elder's like okay where it's at. It's still really strong. Um, but it's a popular item that's strong, but it's not overpowered. So I think it's gonna stay where it is for right now.
Hmm.
But I have messed with other builds. Another way you could go is boots into Madrids and Brutalizer. Brutalizer gives that cooldown reduction, and it also adds some armor penetration, which will add even more damage to his Q and his auto attacks.
Hmm.
Um, the reason I go with those two items is the cooldown reduction is really good. His EQ combo, like that combination, is on a relatively high cooldown, especially early on. And so having some CDR to reduce the time you can do that means you can, do it more often in a team fight, escape from hairier situations more often. It's just very good to have that available to you as often as possible.
Hmm.
The reason I stuck with the Lizard Elder is because the other route is has Madrids in it, and I don't like the inconsistent damage that Madrids does.
Hmm.
But there is a new patch coming out soon, so I'll have to look at that
Okay.
when that comes out. But anyway, moving forward, right after that I go into Locket because the health, armor, shield, and cooldown reduction again is just really strong on Jarvan. Um, at that point when you're done with that item, you've got 20% cooldown reduction, you got armor, you've got health, and you've got a shield. You got two shields. So you can get in, you can just get in there, shield yourself up, do a bunch of damage, and get out. Just really strong mechanics.
Yeah, Locket in general just being an incredible item right now.
Yeah, I think that I love Locket on most of the champions that I play. It's just
Hmm.
incredibly strong.
Yeah, it is. It's so good. Yeah.
Um, from there, I just get to pick up a giant spell for some extra HP, and then it's kind of a toss up from there. The giant spell might go into a Sunfire Cape, it might go into a Randuin's, it might go into a Warmog's. Um, all three are really good, and most of them can be or those three items can be interchanged depending on their team composition. But it kind of depends. Like I wouldn't go Warmogs against an entirely AD team. I'd go like a Randuin's or a Sunfire.
Hmm.
The Warmogs would go into play if they had a heavier AP team, um, because that way you have a lot more health.
Yeah.
There's still no solution for a lot of MR on a bruiser
Nope. Drives me
besides
crazy.
yeah
Force of
beside
nature. Yeah.
yeah
Hmm.
but with the exception of Spirit Visage.
Hmm.
But I think that's overkill at this point. Um, and then Bulwark is kind of situational. It depends on if they do have a lot of AP on their team, then I'll pick it up. If not, I'll just tell the support to pick it up.
Hmm.
Because like I said, you want to be as tanky as possible if you're against a lot of AP. Um,
Yeah.
so against Bruisers, um, let's say they had like a Kha'Zix and like a Zed, I'd probably go and like an Ezreal. I might go Sunfire before Randuin's because you get the AoE magic damage from Sunfire, and they're not auto attacking a lot because Ezreal is mostly Qs and Zed is mostly abilities, and Kha'Zix is mostly abilities. So you just want this flat armor. You don't really need the like reduce the enemy's auto attack
Hmm.
speed. Whereas if they had like a Tristana that was destroying everybody, I might rush a Randuin's
Hmm.
to lower her attack speed to keep me healthier with more armor, and it's gonna apply that. It's gonna give me that activation slow, um, which my W already does, but it's just one more CC ability that I have to help my team out.
Yeah.
The Merc Treads you can finish pretty much at any time. It's kind of situational what you want to do there. Um, you can keep it till later, or you can do it earlier if you need to. If you need a little bit faster move speed to initiate quicker or gap close. Um, and then a Sunfire is my last item for this build. But like I said, the Rhino and Sunfire Warmogs are pretty. You can swap those in and out depending on the enemy team comp. Um, if your team needed more damage, you could throw in another damage item. You could even get a Malma Mortius if you wanted to. You could get a Blade of the Ruin King if you wanted to. You could get, a Black Cleaver if you wanted to. He's real. Another good thing about Jarvan is he's got so many build paths you can do depending on what your team needs, and so you kind of just pick up what you need, pick up what your team needs, and go from there. His kid takes care of the rest.
Yep. Yeah, completely agree, man.
So yeah, he is a extremely strong champion. Um, so yeah, move into runes and masteries now. For masteries, I run 921-0 with the attack speed, damage per level, and armor pen with the offense tree. The armor pen's nice because it works with abilities. So like my ultimate and my Q are going to apply that armor pen, so they'll hit a little bit harder. Um, and then the defensive tree, I get health per level, reduce damage from monsters, and the bladed armor, so I can clear faster and I take less jungle or damage in the jungle. Which his first clear is kind of iffy, depending on how much help he gets.
Depends on your leash. Yeah, should get better after next patch.
Yeah,
Hmm.
um, he does take a lot of damage, so that is good to have the reduced damage taken in the jungle there. And then I get gold every time I use my smite from the mastery or the summer spell mastery. Um, I get unyielding and block, so I take reduced damage from auto attacks, and actually block reduces damage from all sources. And then veteran scars, I get tenacity, percent health increase, which is great with all the giant build items that I get. Tenacity is good because, like I said, you're getting in and out of places. You want to be able to move around and not be tied down with CC. I get um, reduced dam or I get armor and magic resist per enemy champion near me. Reduced damage taken from critical strikes by 10%, and reduced damage altogether by I think that's 3% for the final defensive tree mastery. So it's pretty standard. I mean, I'd say most bruiser junglers use 921-0. Um,
Yeah, definitely. That's pretty much what I build on almost everyone now.
yeah, I think it's pretty set in stone. I like
Hmm.
this a lot. And by building 21 defense, I feel like I can rush that early damage on him of Lizard Elder
Hmm.
because I have so much defense already that I can put it off for a little bit later.
Hmm.
Um, and then my runes are pretty standard too. Armor Pen because it works with my abilities, really strong. Armor Seals, which is pretty staple on junglers. Magic resist per level, and I use attack speed. Glints, there's actually only two there, but there's supposed to be three. Attack speed Glints are good because it helps us clear a lot. I used to run physical damage Glints, but I completely turned away with it because I think attack speed works a lot better in the jungle. You clear quicker. Also, I found especially with Jarvan with his Randuins, his W slow, and or a red buff. If you like jump on somebody, you can stay behind them as they're running towards their tower and keep attacking, moving, attacking, and moving and attacking to keep their slows on them and to keep in front of them and to keep those attacks where instead of chasing them from behind and being behind them the entire time. So I like doing that with extra attack speed. It allows you to keep those attacks and the stutter stepping going on while you're chasing somebody to a tower or something like that.
Yeah, that's really cool. I didn't actually know you could do that with the extra attack speed. That makes sense.
hmm it's a really cool mechanic.
Yeah, that is. That's awesome.
So yeah, that's my Jarvan rundown. Incredible champion. I
Hmm.
like him a lot. I don't really find any faults with him. So I'm surprised he's not played more than he already is. I
Feel
would
that
think,
like Swain, same thing.
yeah. I
Yeah,
mean,
it's crazy because Jarvan. I mean, he's a champion. I found that after I watched you playing him, I got very easily into and
mhm,
realized how strong he was. He's kind of under that weird umbrella where he gets a few nerfs and everyone thinks he's not good, but he's
mhm,
has a core kit that will always be good.
right.
Yeah, and so he's not played enough. I don't know if that changes, in the diamonds where you're at, but certainly at my level, I almost never see him.
Yeah, he's I'd say he's maybe in 1 in 10 games if I don't pick him.
Hmm.
Um he's in every game if I could pick him.
Yeah,
Um
yeah. Mhm.
I don't know. I don't understand why people throw something aside when they get nerfed. Like Lizard Elder got nerfed and everyone's like, "Oh, it sucks now," but it
Yeah,
doesn't. It's still really strong and so is Jarvan and It doesn't just because something got nerfed, you need to still read the stats and see what they do
Hmm.
because they still work. So
Yeah. Yeah, pretty much just have to echo how strong I think Jarvan is in the jungle. I do think he's a top jungler right now. I think Jackson and I have both been playing a lot of Jarvan and Nocturne as our mains, and just because of their ability to control and dominate in the jungle. But yeah, I don't know. You have anything else on Jarvan?
I don't think so. I think that's about it for J4.
So I think then moving into the last part of our broadcast today, we're just going to talk a little bit about the general meta for a couple minutes, and that's just a couple of things. The first thing is basically what we feel are the most powerful items in the game, and we talk about this before the show. I think we both agree that the types of items that are very strong are anything that kind of provides cooldown reduction right now, and any sort of utility. I'll kind of let Jackson explain that.
Yeah, we've sort of run into this thing in season three where everybody gets cooldown reduction, and I'm kind of surprised it took till season three for people to realize how strong CDR is. But I think a part of that's also because um, there's more items that give it, which allows different kinds of champion or different types of champions to build those items. Um, Being able to use your abilities faster, is huge because you don't typically all your damage isn't coming from your auto attacks, it's coming
Mhm.
from your abilities. Um, so things like Locket, any of the new jungle items like Lizard Elder or Spectral Wraith or anything like that. And then as far as utility goes, you know, items like Locket, Shurelya's, Aegis, like these items should be key or should be on every team. Even if it's not by the jungler to support. Like a lot of the times, like my top laner will be like a Shen or a Renekton or something, and they'll pick up the bulwark for the team, and then our support can focus on Locket or
Locket, yeah.
Shurelya's
Hmm.
or the jungler can, and you know being able to give your team bonus stats is huge because of one item. Like think how
Hmm.
much that does. That's just an incredible boost to a team's power. Um, yeah,
Yeah.
I mean it's just incredibly strong. Randuin's same thing. Like even though it's a strictly defensive item, you know, giving your team another CC mechanic with the active proc on it is
Hmm.
huge.
Yeah, and Aegeus will do something like I know that people have done the math on it. It lowers team fight, like in a team fight, it actually lowers your damage, like the damage done to the team by something like 2 to 400 damage or something. It's like you think of how many times you've escaped from a team fight with 40 to 100 hit points, like like a ton of times. I
Right.
know I have, like a ton of times, especially when you're playing Jarvan, and it's like that difference in that damage is what keeps you alive, which is huge.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And especially like, at the beginning of a team fight, what do you do at the beginning of a team fight? The fight starts and everyone blows all their abilities.
Hmm.
Well, if you've got some lockets on your team, it means those shields are absorbing some of that damage for free,
Hmm.
and then you're healthier after the burst comes through, and you're able to fight on.
Yep.
It's a really good mechanic.
Yeah. And then I guess in terms of our second section, which would be what are kind of like the really powerful team compositions and mechanics that are being used in the game. The first one we immediately brought up was an AOE team fight mechanic or composition. So actually, I think that one of the defining champions in these, I didn't say this yesterday, but I think it was Leona. Like Leona, I think just really complements that AOE team fight composition very, very well. Then, of course, you see kind of the more obvious ones like Malphite and things like that. But anyone that can sort of lock down a team or can just AOE and smoke people, obviously, Misfortune complements these very well with the heavy CC. It's just very, very, very powerful in this meta.
Yeah, I feel like you see these specific teams that are specifically built for these reasons,
Hmm.
for specific parts of the game. And the AoE team comp like Malphite, Orianna, Diana, um, Shyvana even, Nautilus. They have these like AoE abilities that are just so good in a team fight. Um, and they'll stack two or three of those together, and if you get hit by every one of those CC abilities, your team just melts. They're gone,
Yeah.
and you lose the fight, and you're probably going to lose the game too.
Yep. Because then those
Um,
champions get fed and they're individually powerful.
hmm
Hmm.
um, yeah, we were talking about this yesterday. I just think there's with these three types of teams I keep seeing is the AoE, the heavy poke,
Yeah.
and like these early domination teams, and which is kind of like that's a bad way of describing that, but I don't really have any other, you know, way of saying it.
Basically, team compositions that are devoted to winning the game early. So I would say like Lee Sin, people that have very high damage, high engage in the early game, but might fall off. Assassins, Kha'Zix type to people like that. And then the poke, that's like Nidalee, Jace, people like that. That really punish, especially at low ELOs, because people are afraid of engaging. So they just get repeatedly get knocked down, and sometimes can't recover from it.
Yeah, and it's funny because like it's kind of like a rock paper scissors type deal between these
Hmm.
three comps. Like you could have a heavy AoE team comp against a heavy poke comp, and yeah, the poke comp's gonna get destroyed if they fight head on because they've got more AoE in the other team. But if they poke the enemy team down, then they'll win fights. The trick there, the catch 22 there is staying away from getting initiated on and using the poke of their team to their advantage.
Yeah.
Um, and like you said, like the Akali, like the blue build Ezreals, um, these team comps that don't have like that AoE behind it, like the Malphite and the Orianna or whatever. They're just so strong early on, and the Kha'Zix, they're so strong early on that I don't care how good your AoE is on your other team. If you've lost three towers or we're up 10 kills before 10 minutes, you don't have a chance to group and beat
Yeah.
us. Like, even if you do group, we're still going to beat you because we're miles ahead of you by now.
Yeah.
So that, these three team comps all are they all work and it's all about execution and, how players play these team comps.
Yep. Yeah. So I don't know. I mean, I think that that's pretty much the core of our broadcast for today. I mean, do you have anything else you're thinking of or
No, I think we just about covered everything.
nailed it? So yeah, I would say we're gonna be ending this episode of Summoner Strategy. For the people that are on live, we have some extra stuff for you afterwards. So I'm just gonna transition and want to thank everyone for checking out the actual episode. And we'll be moving into some other stuff after this, but I'll just transition out for now. And thank you very much.
Thanks, guys. We'll see you next week.
Yeah.